Welcome to the Stronger After Stroke podcast. I'm your host, Rosa Hart, and today joining me is Katelyn Deakins. She is the wife of a young stroke survivor that we've actually had on the podcast before, Russell Deakins. They were young parents, and he was athletic and running races, and she's a nurse. And so this is not something they expected, and I'm really grateful that you're willing to share your experience with us today. And of course, give us some insight into what that's like for a young family, because as we know, younger people are having strokes nowadays, so it affects a lot more people in a similar situation. Yeah. So thank you. So before what happened to Russell, what was your family's experience with stroke?
So one of our best friends is actually one of my friends that I've known since I was like 3. And then it was actually Russell's best man in our wedding. His family, their dad had like 4 or 5 strokes, paralyzed on his left side for the rest of his life, can't do anything on his own. So we had that experience of, oh my gosh, a stroke, like he can't do anything independently anymore. Has to have someone with him 24/7. And then my paternal grandmother actually passed away after experiencing a stroke. So we've always had the outlook of stroke, there's not really going back to normal life from.
And you don't work with stroke patients as a nurse,
don't.
right?
I work in pediatrics. So strokes was new to me. Neuro is not my thing. It was really scary. And like I said, we didn't know what to expect because the only experiences we've personally had with strokes was like long-term deficits, and just not good outcomes whatsoever. So we were not expecting the outcome that Russell had.
Yeah. And what was your family like at that time? Because it's been a few years and your kids are older. I think you have an additional kid since then?
Yeah, we've actually had a third since then. So we had a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, 4-year-old little girl and a 2-year-old little boy. When it happened, thankfully they were with my family, so I was able to go to the hospital with him when the ambulance took him.
Were you at work when it happened?
I was actually driving back to work from picking up lunch for me and a coworker, and my mother-in-law called me to let me know. Because my in-laws live in the same neighborhood and my father-in-law has a home office. So he was able to go over when Russell realized something was going on and help him. So my mother-in-law called and said, hey, we don't know what's happening yet, but we're going to take him to the ER. The ambulance was actually taking him. So I actually beat the ambulance there.
Oh, was it the hospital you work at, or was it a different location?
No, it was, I work off Stone Street in Valley Station, and they took him to Audubon. So I was an emotional wreck the entire drive, not knowing what was going on, because at that point they had no idea that it was a stroke. So luckily my family had the kids, and once I told them, we had a village behind us that were like, don't worry about the kids, take care of him. Granted, they were 4 and 2, so they really didn't know what was going on. It was just an extended vacation for them with
the grandparents.
Yes, getting to stay with aunt and uncle and grandparents. So, and it was hard to see them too, because they'd be like, "Oh, where's Daddy?" And we didn't want them to see him like that.
Because he had brain surgery to go with that, right?
Yeah, and he had a brain drain coming out of the top of his head, and he also just didn't want them to see him like that, especially his little girl. They're thicker than thieves. So it's hard to explain. We just kept telling them like, oh, Daddy's at the doctor. We didn't want to use terms like hospital and stroke. And we said he hurt his head just because they were asking why he was at the doctor. And they just didn't understand what we were trying to explain, but trying to explain it at a 4 and 2-year-old level.
Right.
So,
without making it any more scary. Yeah. So what were the most immediate challenges you faced in the early days after the stroke, especially when you started leaving the hospital? Like, were there like really expensive things that you would have hoped insurance would cover that you had a lot of out-of-pocket expenses for?
So with leaving the hospital, he had to have a wheelchair because, of course, he wasn't able to walk on his own yet. So that insurance covered a portion of it, but then we had to pay the rest, and it was like almost like a rent-to-own payment. So we paid it monthly, so we had to pay for that, and then we got lucky to where his grandparents had like a walker, so we didn't have to pay for a walker. And we didn't have to pay for a shower chair, or else we would have had to pay for that out of pocket too, because his grandparents had it. We had to pay for a toilet seat that goes over the toilet to kind of like raise it up for him, and also had handles. And basically, those were rent to own, where you paid so much out of pocket after what insurance would cover. And then the wheelchair, I learned because we had an amazing rep that came in from Gold's to explain it all to us. And with insurance, if we didn't turn the wheelchair back in by the 1-year mark, that's the only wheelchair insurance would have covered for 5 years. So if...
Was it like a driving one?
No, just a normal, like I had to push him wheelchair.
So if he ever needed one that was like a higher level of, like, it wouldn't apply to that. You would just be on your own for that.
Yeah. So basically, if something crazy were to happen and he were to have another incident, and we hadn't turned that back in by the year mark, insurance would not have covered a more like, I don't know how to explain it.
Expensive one?
Yeah. Like one that would meet more requirements that he would need if he was worse off than this time.
Right.
So trying to get all that turned back in by the year mark was a little bit stressful. But then, like I said, it was kind of like rent to own. So you paid all this out of pocket and then turned it back in and didn't keep any of it.
I could not contain my visceral reaction to that.
So, and I mean, it's not anything Golds can control.
Right.
Because they're just going based off what insurance. But I was thankful that they told us that, especially when they had us sign the contract, that they told us, hey, if you don't need this, like, please be sure to turn it back in by that year mark, or else you're stuck and you're not going to be able to get a different one.
Mm-hmm. That's really helpful. I'm glad he was very clear about that.
Yeah.
Wow. And then were there other like medications that were expensive over the cost of insurance?
For the most part, we're lucky with his insurance. They covered a majority of his medications at pretty decent price. He was on a lot of them, so it was definitely a learning curve so it took a while where like I was getting his medicines together, but then part of his neuro rehab was us to work on it together so he could learn to take it over himself.
Good.
So we worked really closely together on, okay, you need to take this 2 times a day. You need to take this 3 times a day. You need to take this every other day. Like, so it was really stressful in that aspect, but he was willing to learn because he wanted to become more independent. There was issues like with his liver doctor and stuff. They were trying to get meds, and for the longest time we couldn't without it costing a fortune, but we finally got that figured out like this year.
Oh, great. Any hot tips on how you did that, or?
It's insurance is just
appealing the insurance in order to get it finally approved with peer-to-peer conversations.
Yeah, and then being open to other options, reaching out to different pharmacies, figuring out who had it.
Yeah, isn't it amazing how you can get the same medication from 2 different pharmacies and the price is completely different because of their like contracts that they have where
like
they get the medication
rates. Yeah.
And one thing I do want to touch on right now that a lot of people are not aware of is that like some of the really expensive brand name drugs that there are not generics for, they do have like a discount program where you can get it for $5 or $25, and pretty much everyone will like actually get approved for that price point. But you have to like know where to apply for that, and a lot of place it. A lot of doctors are not aware of it, and they might say, oh, well, this other medication might not be ideal, but it's cheaper, and they'll just prescribe you that, whereas you could be on something that could be more protective. So if you're on a brand name medication and you want more information about their discount program to find out if you could qualify, feel free to look at their website for that. And we have social workers in our office here at the Resource Center that will talk to people about how to apply for those programs. So I really wanted to take that time to point that out because there are a lot of more affordable options than people know about, because it does require some paperwork, but it's worth not paying $800 or $900 a month, especially if you can't do that. And still get the medicine you need to be safe and prevent stroke.
Yep.
So thank you. Were there any resources or support systems that were particularly helpful for you during the time he was at rehab? Because he spent some time in acute rehab, right?
Yes. So after his 2 weeks in the ICU at Norton, he went to Fraser Rehab, inpatient downtown, for another 2 weeks. At that point, he was getting better, so I didn't have to be there 24/7 with him. But they had some great resources they helped us. So one thing you don't realize is that you have to learn how to help your significant other or family member walk, and you have to get signed off by a staff member in order to get them out of bed yourself.
So that you don't hurt yourself.
Or them, yeah.
Yeah. Or drop them.
Yeah. So if they are considered a fall risk, so if they have their lovely yellow socks, you're not allowed to get them out of bed until someone's signed off on it, and they give you a fancy wristband that says you can get them out of bed and all that fun stuff. So definitely the OTs and PTs worked really well with helping to learn how to properly ambulate him and get him up and about. There was a psychiatrist also at Norton Fraser downtown that met with both of us. And it really helped because she opened both of our eyes in different aspects about how stroke can affect the patient and the caregiver. And that, like, don't be afraid to ask for help, like mental help if you need it, which has really helped with. Sometimes he notices that he is a little bit different, like in his mental space, since his stroke. And I know he struggles with it, but knowing that that's normal.
Yeah.
It's not his normal, because he never experienced that, went through it. But having her tell us that this is normal and how to just work through it and discuss with people and not to let it get between us, or how we can help each other in those situations. So that helped a lot too in that aspect. And then they gave us some tips on, I did a lesson with them in OT one day about how to get him in and out of the shower, how to help with that too. So just really the therapists in general were helpful resources with just learning how to adapt and help. Like you said, I'm a nurse. I went through all my nurse training, but when you don't use it, you kind of lose it. It's like riding a bike.
Well, and you didn't go to PT school or
No.
OT school, or behavioral therapy training. Like, we get some basic psych therapeutic communication training in nursing school, but you don't know what the norms are for people after these situations, especially because you work with kids. So yeah, it's very different when you're talking to somebody who's married about how to handle your adult relationships. That's not a conversation you're having with your child patients.
Yeah.
So yeah. I'm really glad that you had all that support. And that's another benefit of going to acute rehab after a hospital stay. A lot of people want to go straight home and they don't want to go to a nursing home. But there are different levels of rehabilitation centers. There's acute rehab where they're doing a lot of that teaching and those hours and hours of training you how to do your own activities of daily living. In acute rehab, there's subacute rehab, which is like less time dedicated to that per day. And then you have like more of the nursing homes that people think of and are familiar with. So, and if you are listening to this and you realize that they were trying to send you to an acute rehab and maybe you turned that down, sometimes you can even get admitted to go to that from home. So you can definitely reach out to your primary care and find out if they know of a place near you that is an option. So I really appreciate you sharing how that was really helpful and supportive holistically for both of you in that environment. How did your roles and responsibilities in your household change after the stroke? You talked about helping him with his medications.
So it took a while for him to get comfortable with getting up and doing stuff.
Without falling, you mean?
Yeah, because he still needed his walker, and then even with his walker, he still needed assistance from another person. So I know it really affected him. We have a 2-story house.
Yeah.
The kids are on the 2nd story, so he couldn't help put them to bed. He couldn't help get them ready for bed or for school or anything along those lines. Thankfully, we have a pretty open floor plan, so he was able to get to the restroom, but for a while, he still needed someone with him. Like, he wasn't supposed to be on his own until he was cleared by his outpatient rehab therapist. So cooking, cleaning, taking care of the kids.
How long did that last before he could really be independent on that first floor?
I would say probably about 6 to 8 weeks.
After getting home from the acute rehab?
Yeah, after getting home from Frazier, he was able to start doing stuff because he was home majority of the time because he wasn't back to work.
And you had to go to work.
Yeah, I did have to go back to work. And then we had to have someone at the house with him while I was at work.
Okay, let's talk about this.
Yeah.
Like, how did you avoid losing your job while he was going through this?
So I had to file for FMLA, and it's very stressful because if you don't file within so many days, you basically get denied. So luckily my boss kept reminding me like, hey, you need to file, you need to file. But then it was basically a scavenger hunt game. Like, okay, who's going to sign off on this paperwork? It's not like it's your own personal FMLA to where
Like
I
for
just go
your
to my
husband.
doctor.
Like for him, who is the stroke patient, to get that FMLA paperwork
Yeah.
for his job. Did you find someone to sign for that easier?
Yes, because they were his doctors.
Yeah.
So his neurologist, his neuro surgeon, his PCP even was like, oh yeah, I'll sign off on this. But for me, it was, hey, will you sign off on this? They're like, but you're not our patient. And I'm like, but I'm having to care for your patient. Like, I'm the at-home caregiver for your patient. Luckily,
And the in-hospital
Yeah.
caregiver. Can you share with us how important you saw it was for you to be there in the hospital in those early days, let alone in Frazier?
Yeah, especially you really need to make sure you advocate for your family member, your spouse, whoever you're there with. So being there, I know it sounds like it's extra, but being there 24/7 really is like a requirement. He doesn't remember majority of his hospital stay, at least at the Norton side. So he would not have been able to make decisions, comprehend anything the doctors were saying to him. He even would try to get up out of bed in the middle of the night with a brain drain in his head. So I stayed up all night long, and then when his family would come visit during the day, I'd get to nap. But being there all day, every day, especially when he was not in the right mind to be by himself, was a requirement. It was hard. One note I do have is make sure you don't have access to your family member's my chart. I would get all the diagnostic tests results, all the blood test results back before the doctor would even come in and talk to me. And so then I'm a nervous wreck.
Like, what does this mean?
Don't do that to yourself. Make sure you don't have access to your spouse or your family member's my chart.
Was there any time you had to keep mistakes from happening?
So there were, one of his nurses in the first few days was doing his NIH scores, and she wasn't being patient with him. He got a couple answers wrong, or he was going too slow for her liking to like read the sentence across the page. And so she would like shake the paper in front of his page or in front of his face. And then one part he got wrong, and she looked across him to me and was like, "Oh, he got that wrong." But like, it's not like he was deaf. It's not like he mentally wasn't there. He heard everything. Like, he knew what was going on. He just couldn't see the right half of his vision field at that time. So one way you can advocate for your family member is you can ask the charge nurse to not have a nurse back. If it just was not a good experience for you, if they just weren't a right fit for your family or your situation, knowing that not everybody does. I used to work in the hospital, so I know that you can ask to not have a patient back or not have a nurse back, whichever side of the picture you're in. So I did that. I asked the charge nurse, please, to not give her back to us the next night. And I'm so thankful they listened to me, because the next night, that night shift nurse is the one that caught his brain swelling. So I always to this day, I think if it wasn't for that, and it wasn't for that moment where she wasn't giving him the chance and she was talking to me like he wasn't there and able to like understand what was going on, and if I wouldn't have asked to not have her back the next night, I don't know that his swelling would have been caught. Um, so I feel like everything does happen for a reason. It just sucked that it had to happen like that way, to where we had a nurse that made him feel bad about himself. But like I said, if that wouldn't have happened that evening, and I didn't ask for her to be switched out, the night shift nurse we got the next night probably wouldn't have been in our care and caught that swelling.
Which are things that a neuro nurse is trained to pick up on that maybe you wouldn't have been able to describe yourself. Yeah. So that's a really good point. And that's one of the values of having a family member there at the bedside, and why it is important to make sure you're not losing your job so that your family can be stable when you go home. And so, do you remember who ended up filling out your FMLA paperwork so that you could?
His PCP ended up signing mine for me, as being like just a primary caregiver, so I can be off when needed for appointments and to just be in the hospital with him. So I was thankful that his PCP was understanding and was able to get all that taken care of within a timely fashion, so I didn't lose my job, because that's not something you think about. Like I said, you think about the person that's experiencing needing the FMLA, but then this person that's caregiving needs that FMLA as well.
Exactly.
So.
And I wanted to point out here that in Kentucky, and I don't know if it's in every state, but other states as well, there's like a waiver program that can help pay for in-home care, and even maybe pay the family member who is staying home with them. So if you are staying home taking care of a family member, and you're not able to work, you can definitely look and see if there is a waiver program in your state that could help make some of the financial difference in times like that. How has the stroke impacted your relationship with your husband?
I feel like it's made us stronger. Just because it's something we've been through that we never thought we would have had to go through. We survived it together.
You even ran the race with him afterwards, didn't you? Some of them?
So I didn't do the initial one after, but I just got back into running with him as well. We just had our third kid. She'll
Yeah.
be a year this month, actually. And so I just decided, like, I'm gonna start doing this with you. Like, if I have no excuse, you went through a stroke and you did it. I can do it after having 3 kids. We got this. But no, I do feel like it made us stronger. Um, there are still those moments where, like, you can tell, like, he gets angry, and I just have to remind him, like, you got to talk to me. Like, I don't know what's going on. Um, but it's definitely something that can either make or break you, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm definitely glad it didn't break us.
Yeah.
But we have an amazing family that we wanted to get him back healthy for, and
Yeah.
he's not back to 100%, but I would say he's back to like 98, 99.
Yeah.
He's almost he's there. He's
Well,
just
and he's using his story to encourage other
Mhm.
people and seems to be finding a lot of meaning in that. So, and I know I'm thankful he's encouraging a lot of other stroke survivors. So,
Yeah.
thank you for supporting him and all that too. Um, so, first of all, you're a nurse, so you have some clinical training, but what aspects of caregiving did you find most surprising or difficult to adapt to?
um I don't know. That's a hard question. I guess just like having to be an adult caregiver. Like, I take care of pediatric patients. I take care of my kids. But you don't really expect to have to start bathing a grown human that is bigger than you. Like, um,
Well, and that's a good point too, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, I'll go home with my spouse and they'll take care of me.
yeah,
But like you said, you had to get trained on how to do that without hurting yourself or him. And there are a lot of people who they don't have the physical strength to
yeah,
do a lot of that care for people. And so I'm really glad you had a lot of support, but also encouragement to ask for help when you needed it.
hmm
Because you can't be having both of you laid up and hurt. That wouldn't do any good. Um, let's see. Can you talk to us about your emotional well being and how that was affected by this experience?
I feel like in the beginning, I kind of just like shut down. I was in a lot of like denial. I would cry just not around people. I didn't want to seem weak for him. I wanted to stay strong and be able to advocate for him.
Mhm.
Um, as you can tell now, I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, you're in a safe place.
um,
The crisis has passed.
it was hard um, emotionally because he's my person. Like, he's who I like go to if I'm upset or if I'm having a bad day, and you can't really do that. Um, you want them to recover, and you don't want that extra like stimulation to their brain, because with stroke patients, you want the least amount of stimulation so their brain can heal.
In those
Uh,
early days.
yeah, and so like it was hard to like, what do you do? Because you can't go to your person because you don't want to put that burden on them. And then he would have moments of breaking down when everyone left the room, and it was just me and him, and trying to hold it together for him.
Mhm.
It was hard.
And with those experiences that you had with your friends and your other family members in strokes, were you worried about that happening with him?
Yeah, I kept thinking about our 2 kids at home and knowing how close he is with him, because he's a great father. It was just hard imagining him not being able to do stuff with them anymore. Um, I wasn't as worried about, like, the situation with my grandma, how she passed. She was older. And it's not like they didn't catch it in time, so like hers was inevitable. But like with my friend's dad, like, yeah, that crossed my mind a lot, especially after the brain swelling and they were talking about how they couldn't get it to go down and he's going to have an emergency brain surgery, uh, and all this other stuff. It was just hard thinking about, like, is he going to get back to being able to do stuff on his own? Because I could see, especially in those first few days, how he was. And then he actually even got worse before going to rehab after his brain surgery. Um, so, I mean, it wasn't until we got to rehab and I could see his improvement day by day. And then he graduated from in-house rehab, and then he got put in the neuro rehab program.
Mm-hmm.
And then I could see his progress. So you just can't give up. You just can't let your mind go to the worst. And it's easier said than done.
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely easier said than done in those situations, especially when you're not expecting it. So,
Definitely. Yeah. And I think in preparation for this conversation, you and I were talking about it, and you said, wow, I didn't even realize how hard that was because I just blocked that out.
yeah.
So, yeah, I'm really glad you're in a place now where I can look back on it in hindsight
Yeah.
and I feel like, wow, maybe I'm stronger than I thought I was. Yeah. So, you want to brag on your family a little bit for how much they supported you and all that?
Oh my gosh. We have the best village behind us. So between my parents, his parents, my brother and sister-in-law, and then our best friends, they basically moved into our house, took care of our 2 kids, our 2 dogs that I think everyone was ready to kill because they drove them crazy, but they still stuck it out. And even the fish, I don't think any of the fish died in that time frame either. But between the 8 of them, it was amazing. I didn't have to worry about a thing. They kept my kids fed. Our daughter was in school at the time, and then our son was in daycare. So they were getting her to school, they were getting him to daycare, doing any of her homework. I remember getting pictures of her. It was around Christmas time. I remember getting pictures of her, like art assignments they had sent home that were homework to do. They would just take them to do stuff, get them out of the house, keep them occupied. They did all of our laundry, kept the house clean, did the dishes, basically anything that we would have had to do day by day if this weren't the situation, they took care of. And they didn't ask for anything in return. They knew it was helping us. They knew it was helping the kids. And I'm so grateful for that. Like, I understand that not everybody's got that. And I definitely don't ever want to take that for granted just because of how special they are and how much they all helped us with everything with the kids in the house. And
Yeah.
they also helped with getting bills paid when they saw them come in the mail. They did like meal train and stuff like that to help with other, like getting the kids fed. They did a couple fundraisers that actually helped us pay a lot of our medical bills, where people had like donated or contributed to the fundraiser.
Wow.
So they definitely went above and beyond without being asked.
Because as much as we've talked about, it's important to ask for help. Those are probably things that you wouldn't feel comfortable asking for help
Yeah.
with, but at the same time, or even had mental space to recognize the need. Like if you're in the hospital or in the rehab with him, you're not even seeing those things come in, and you don't know what the kids need for school and things like that. So while it is important to ask for help, I think a lot of the individuality that we have in this country is also something we need to like look back at how do we be a village for each other? How do we be a good neighbor for one another? Because on the one hand, you've got your family, which you hope that your family will step up in those situations. But you mentioned you also had your friends because they were stepping up and doing these things for you without being asked, that you may not even have seen the need for yet, and taking care of them before you even knew about it. And so I really want to encourage people that when you see a need, don't just say, let me know if I can help, because a lot of times people don't even know how you can help. But ask questions, learn what they're going through, and find a way to help, even without being asked, because it really does take a village. Yeah. So, what has been your experience with healthcare providers and rehabilitation services, and did being a nurse make it any easier?
Yes and no to the being a nurse. I knew enough to know what to ask, but not enough to like fully understand. Um, I feel like a lot of people, when they're not in the healthcare field, they don't know what questions to ask. So ask. Just if it's a question that comes up, nothing's a stupid question.
Right. The only dumb question is the one you don't ask,
Yeah.
because then you won't have the answer.
Yeah. So definitely ask the questions, because even me being a nurse, there were things I wasn't sure on. So I asked. We had amazing healthcare providers. His neurosurgeon, Dr. Yao, was amazing and was there. I think we saw him every day but one, for the 2 weeks we were at Norton. He was awesome, and he made sure to sit me down and explain things and say, hey, do you understand what I'm telling you? And then even just his hospitalist at Norton was amazing as well, and would explain things to us the way they needed to. I also don't normally let people know I'm a nurse whenever I'm taking a family member somewhere, because I want them to explain it how they would to a normal person, especially in that situation. I'm not a neuro nurse. So, like, there were things, like I said, I knew enough of, but I didn't know enough of.
Like, you don't know those same acronyms and what they shorthand for things are. Don't be talking to me in your secret neuro lingo.
So for the longest time, a lot of them didn't even know I was a nurse. I made the mistake a couple of times of using the word like coags, and the nurse practitioner was like, something's not adding up there. So they were amazing. And then his rehab doctor, he's something else. We saw him enough that I could point him out just from across the room. But he was awesome too, with like helping with his rehab and all his stuff. And then even his outpatient neuro doctor, Russell says he's my boy all the time. Just because he's so down to earth and chill and just will help out. And I remember taking him to his first neuro follow-up, and he was even listening to my rambling and concerns and all that about medicines and wanting to change up his medicines and stuff like that. So all his care team has been amazing. Like I said earlier, I feel like everything happens for a reason. We were put in those specific spots at specific times. Like, if he wouldn't have had his brain swelling on that one night, we wouldn't have had that amazing nurse. If we wouldn't have had that amazing nurse that caught it, we probably wouldn't have been on Dr. Yao's night, and Dr. Yao wouldn't have done his surgery. And I feel like everything just kind of led to another. And we were blessed with some of the best, for sure.
Yes, you were. I know them, and yes, you were. Let's see. Were there any barriers you faced in accessing care or services for your husband, especially after you left the hospital?
So we knew we wanted to get him into the neuro rehab program. And I think we were on a wait list, and we had to wait like 2 or 3 weeks to get into that.
So just sitting in the hospital waiting.
They sent us home.
You did. You waited at home.
We waited at
to go
home.
to acute rehab.
Well, no, to go to the outpatient.
The outpatient.
Yes, the neuro rehab. It was
Okay.
5 days a week for 6 hours a day, I think. It was long. It was like sending him off to school.
Wow.
But so they sent us home and they were like, just do your thing until you get into neuro rehab. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do? Like, they tried to like give us a few exercises to do, but that's hard when you don't really have the equipment at
and
home.
the support. And if you're
Yes.
at home and then they're like, oh, mama's home.
Yeah.
Let's do kid stuff.
So once we did finally get into that, it was then getting him there, getting him home. I was trying to go back to work, so I wasn't just burning all my FMLA and flex time and all that sort of stuff, so I can have like a paycheck. And so I would take him to neuro rehab, and then my dad would go pick him up from neuro rehab. And so, like I said, it was literally like we were shipping him off to school. Like, I'd take him to school in the morning, and he'd get picked up in the afternoon, and then doctor's appointments, having to get him there. And you do not realize how some doctors' offices are not the most walker friendly.
Oh, really?
There's a couple that we had to like navigate a couple steps to get into, and it was, yeah. So that was fun. But
There wasn't a ramp for a wheelchair?
not that I could see, like within a good distance of him
Okay.
having to walk extra, because the longer he walked,
Mm-hmm.
the more he was exhausted and out of breath.
Yeah.
So
That could be a
But-
good argument for if you're not having a handicap accessible facility, maybe you should offer telemedicine. But that's a plug for another day. So as far as driving, I know driving was a big deal for him. He had a CDL, so he had to drive as part of his work. So, we've talked a lot about him having trouble walking, but now he's like back to running and things like that. So, tell me about his journey to going back to driving and what you found out when trying to get that paperwork sorted out.
So they never like truly take your license away and say like, oh, we're taking it away, you're not allowed to drive. It's more of like an honor system. So of course he didn't drive until he was signed off. He had to be signed off on by his neurologist, by his optometrist, because he had the double vision.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had to take a driving test. So first his neurologist signed off saying, yeah, I think you're in the right space to be able to drive again. And then we had to go to his optometrist, which is like a neuro optometrist. And he said, yes, with your glasses, you're doing better. And then they did like a visual field acuity where they just blink all these million dots and to check all his peripheral vision and everything. And once he did all those tests, they said that he was good to drive because with his glasses, he was fine.
Mm-hmm.
And then he went to the neuro rehab program, which this is the part we did have to pay for out of pocket. We had to pay, I think it was like $100 for the test, and they basically take him out on a road course with just one of their OTs.
Yes.
Not like a driving professional from like the licensing branch or anything like that. It was just one of their OTs getting a car with this man that hopefully he can drive. So once he passed like the road course, then they signed off saying he could drive too. I don't recall him ever having to like submit anything to like the licensing branches regarding this. They were just like, okay, you're good to drive. So then he
Because it
started
wasn't
driving.
taken away. So there's nothing to like get back.
So then he turned all that into work because he does drive a company truck. And they were like, okay, they said you're good to drive, you're good to drive. Well, fast forward, what was it, about a year and a half to almost 2 years. And he's like, maybe I should surrender the CDL part of my license, because technically, if your dura mater is exposed, you're not allowed to have a CDL. So he was informed of that by his Baptist Works doctor that had to sign off, like re-sign off on his DOT physical to be able to have his CDL. So they basically said, no, you can't have your CDL. But they never, like, again, did anything with his license, never said you need to submit this, anything. So back to that 1.5 years, 2 years later, he surrenders the CDL portion of his license, and they say, oh, well, in order for you to keep a license at all, you have to do all these things to get approval to be able to drive, which are all the things he did 2 years previously. But it had to be done within 90 days. So now he had to go back to the optometrist, redo all those testing. He did improve.
Well, that's good.
And then he had to go back to the neurologist and get another letter. He had to have all this paperwork signed by his PCP saying he was eligible to drive, and basically go through all of this again in order to keep his license, just because he was doing the right thing and surrendering his CDL.
Just being honest.
Yeah. So never thought that that would have happened 2 years later to cause all this havoc.
Right. So if you were going to do it, please do it all at once in the beginning and not 2 years later, so you don't have to do it twice.
But like I said, it's not something they told him and prepared him about. Like, they didn't say, go to them and tell them you just did all this testing and you're good to drive.
Yeah, it's amazing how different areas, they don't even know what goes on in other people's jobs, right? So I'm really glad he got that sorted out. But thank you for sharing that too, because I'm sure a lot of other people are in a similar situation, because as people who are working have strokes and these things need to be taken care of paperwork wise, it's good to hear on the front end, hopefully, what to look out for. And you mentioned, I don't know for sure who he did his driving assessment with, but the occupational therapist, who I know we have one who's specifically trained to assess your driving. They have a special car where they can take over the controls if you're not being safe. And then also if you need modifications to be safe, like if only one of your arms works, there's a handle they can put on there. Or if your pedal foot is different and it needs to be moved over, like they have different adjustments they can make. So I want people to know that there are special professionals out there who have driving assessment tests like that can help you with modifications so that you can be more independent. I don't know if that's at all what he experienced, but I want you to know that's available. And also, the Office of Vocational Rehab, not just in Kentucky, but look up Office of Vocational Rehab in your state. And if insurance is not covering the therapy you need to go back to work, or if you're not able to do the job that you did before, like he was able to return to his same work, maybe do it a little differently. But the Office of Vocational Rehab can make sure you get the therapy that you need to be able to return to some kind of work, so that you don't have to live on disability, and remove some of those financial barriers. And I do know in Kentucky, they cover that driving assessment, which insurance does not. So I'm glad that we brought that up, because that's an important resource to be aware of. And then what have you learned about stroke recovery that you wish you had known earlier?
So the main thing I wish I knew, just because I feel like it would have taken a lot of stress off of both of us, and our families, is that I know in the past everyone's been like, oh, what they have at a year is all they're going to have, with recovery. And we're learning that he's still improving.
Yeah, years
And
later.
we're 2.5 years out. Like, he's still improving. He's doing great. There's things that family members will even notice, like, oh, you don't even walk like you used to. Like, you don't even walk like you had a stroke. Like, you're doing great. And that is one thing that I wish I knew, because I feel like it would have taken a lot of stress off of us and myself as well, with like pushing to make sure he got his rehab in a timely fashion.
And that hope
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
you hit 6 months or you hit a year and you're not just stuck this way.
Yeah.
But you're right. The word on the street throughout the medical community was however you are 6 months to a year after a stroke, that's how you can expect to be. That's your new normal. But we've learned so much about neuroplasticity and how neuroplasticity doesn't stop. So if you don't stop, you can always keep getting better. The rate at which you get better does slow down after that time period. But like you said, it's not imperceptible.
Yeah.
You can have really significant improvements
Yeah.
as long as you keep working at it. So
Yeah.
I'm glad you know that now.
I know.
I wish you knew it earlier. Um, how has this experience changed your perspective on life and health in general? Yeah, I know you said you took up running.
So it definitely makes me want to try to live a healthier life. You never know what's going to happen. Um, I have my own health issues as well. And I just look at that, and then his stroke, and just how, just live every day.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it sounds cliche, but like, you never know what's going to happen the next day. And just trying to be healthier for our kids and our family to live a happy and long life. I think that's my main like takeaway, is just don't take anything for granted,
Mm-hmm.
and just be better for yourself and your family.
Yeah. And I'm glad you are making yourself a priority in that too, and
Yeah.
not just getting lost in how he's doing. Because I
Yeah.
know a lot of the time, us as nurses or as caregivers, we can kind of lose our identity in the people we're taking care of and forget to take care of ourselves. But how can we take care of others if we don't take care of
Yeah.
ourselves first, right? Yeah. And then what advice would you give to other spouses navigating life after their partner's stroke?
Don't be afraid to ask for help. Um, there's resources for the caregivers, there's resources for the stroke patients. Um, you, like we just mentioned, you need to take time for yourself. If it means asking for help and having someone come sit with them for the day so you can just get out of the house,
Yeah.
have a little bit of you time. But the biggest thing is, don't be afraid to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
Advocate for yourself and for the patient, whether it be your spouse, your parent, your sibling, child, whoever. Just make sure you're advocating and also asking for help.
Yeah. That is so important. A lot of the times I'll be on the phone talking to caregivers and they'll be like, I'm the only one who can do this. And we'll talk about, well, do you have any other friends and family who can support you as you're the primary caregiver, and they're like, oh, yeah, but I don't want to bother them and things like that. And while it's important to have those honest conversations with the rest of your family, like if they don't know how they can help you and they don't know what questions to ask, to spell it out. But I do want people to know that there are like other supports outside of that. One of the things that I was referencing earlier about the waiver program, they also can cover respite care, which is having somebody come and sit with your loved one, help them go to the bathroom and stuff so you can, I don't know, go to the grocery store and not be so worried that you're going to come back to something terrible happening, or even go somewhere overnight and have a good night's rest where you're not being woken up throughout the night, right? And then so that's we have KIPTA in Kentucky. It might be called something else in other states. And then we also have the TBI Trust Fund, and that can help with respite care as well as covering some of those other rehab things that are not covered by insurance. So don't think that your only option is begging your friends and family for help. And um, definitely look up if that's something that is available in your state, and feel free to reach out to us at the Norton Neuroscience Institute Resource Center if you want to find out about other available resources and you're Googling and you just can't find it. because that's what we're here for, is to help identify those resources. So, as we wrap up today, Katelyn, how would you say you balance the hope and the realism after your husband's recovery?
Um, it was hard at first, but just being a part of his care and like going to his appointments and listening to what the doctors say and doing what we needed to do to help with his recovery also helped with the hope. Um, just not giving up, um, and not just saying, oh, it's going to be like these other situations where we've dealt with before in the past. And like trying and doing what you need to do for the recovery just helps your hope in general, because you can see the improvements. You can see that, oh, this isn't worst case scenario. Um, and just believing in yourself as the caregiver and in your family member. Believing that if you all want it bad enough, that it will get there. It just takes time.
Mm-hmm.
Now, don't give up hope because it's not there in 6 months.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
going to take longer than that.
Yeah.
But keeping that hope alive is what also helped the recovery and vice versa.
Exactly. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story today. And for our listeners, if you found this episode helpful, please like and comment wherever you're listening so that we'll know, and let us know if something you heard was helpful. Let me know if there are other topics that you would like to hear about that we haven't covered yet on the Stronger After Stroke podcast. Subscribe wherever you're listening or if you're watching on YouTube so you'll be notified, and I'll see you in the next episode.